So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's class. This is the first class of a series of 6. It's designed for adult beginners and intermediates. So most of the ladies here today with me have been doing classes with me previously, but I still keep it at beginner level because I think it's really important to get your head around the basics. And that's what I specialise in, is doing artwork and art classes for beginners. So today we are painting an autumn leaf, and that's our picture there. This is actually a photo I took recently myself, and you'll find the photo reference at the top there, who took it and all the things. So if you need that information when you're sharing your artwork, you'll be able to acknowledge the photographer. So I went to Bundanoon recently on a family reunion, little village or town down in New South Wales, and it's autumn. And I spotted this leaf on the step of a cafe, and I thought, oh my goodness, what a gorgeous picture. What I love about it is the shadows and the light and the colours, the whole thing. So that's what I decided we were going to paint today. So I know in previous classes not long ago, I was doing a little bit more complicated stuff, and it was not as easy as it should be. So I've decided to try and keep it easier this course. And it's more about learning the basics about colour and texture and all the things that we need to know. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my other screen, which is my iPad now above my desk. And there you'll be able to see what I'm going to be painting or drawing. There we go. So now you can see what's on my desk. And I'll just switch my light on so that's a bit brighter for everybody to see. Beautiful. So as I've mentioned, if you want me to slow down, please tell me, and we'll get stuck into this. So you can see there I've got my notes on top. So keep your notes handy. You need to have them nearby so that you can look at your reference picture. Unless you have your reference photo on another screen, which I've done, I've got it on my screen next to me, so I can see it there. If you have an iPad or a phone or something else where you can put your picture, then it makes it a lot easier to be able to see it. And you can also zoom in and get a nice close-up of what's going on there. So today we're going to start off, as we always do, with a charcoal drawing first. So part 1 of our class is always a charcoal sketch. The reason we do that is to get familiar with the picture, to draw it all up and get it in proportion, study the tone. Tone's really important. I was just saying a little bit earlier, tone is something that I could never get my head around. I always couldn't work out what tone meant. Tone means from light to dark. It literally means the darkest to the lightest. So when we're looking at black and white pictures, and I always like to look at my pictures in black and white because it really helps you find the lights and the darks and the mids. And this picture I chose today because I thought it's got a really good amount of both in there. We've got a beautiful mid-tone in the background. We've got a dark tone in the shadow, and then we've got the lights in the leaf with a few little mid-tones as well to give it some texture. So that's what tone is, and it's really important to get your head around that and then to be able to convert colour into tone. So it's looking at colours from light to dark. All right, so have your notes handy. Put those away or aside out of the way because we're not going to start painting now. So the first thing we're going to need is an art diary. So I just use one of these art diaries that you can get in the newsagents or Officeworks, or even the $2 shops have them. And they come in different levels of quality. And this is great just for keeping all your little sketches in. So I've got all my class sketches and things in here that we've done this year. And that's perfect for working with charcoal. After we've done that, then we'll move on to colour, and we'll be using a coloured paper, but I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to it. So what we're going to do today is looking at our picture. Just bring that back over a little bit so you can see. On here, I've got grid lines. So what I've done is I've gridded my picture up into quarters, And that gives us the ability then to kind of segment off the picture and just look at each quarter as a separate thing, because then we're not looking at a leaf in shadow, we're looking at shapes, we're looking at negative space, we're looking at angles and all those things. So when you look at things in each quarter, it just changes it and helps you to draw it the way it is in the picture. So the idea is to break it down into sections. If you have a more complicated picture, you can break it down into more sections. So you could do it into 8s, 16s, or whatever works for you. This is not terribly complex, so I thought a quarter would be fine for today. So if you get your art diary or sketching paper and some charcoal, so I've got a range of charcoal here. I keep it all in a little box so I know where it is. When I'm just drawing lines, I like to use a long, thin stick like this one. And then for shading, I like something a little bit shorter and fatter. That gives me the ability to hold onto it and rub it on the paper. So I reckon those two should be enough for today. And then we want to, first off, we want to draw up the area of our picture. So again, looking at this, we're working in a portrait shape today. So that means I need to do a thumbnail in a portrait shape. So that's long on the side, short on the top. And it's about that. So if you've done this with me before, you know that I don't get too caught up in being very precise. This is all about practicing the drawing, getting into art mode, relaxing, and just studying the picture. Once we've done that, then we want to draw up our grid lines. Now, if you want to measure, you can. So that's about 13, so 6.5. If you don't want to measure, then just wing it and put a halfway mark wherever you think it should be, about there. So as I said, I don't get very precise at this stage. In the next stage, we do. Now, looking at this picture, you can see that this was on a step of a cafe. So you can see there's a gap at the top and the bottom. So what we could do is just continue this background all the way through. Or if you like the look of the top and the bottom like that, then you can leave it and put a bit of greenery. It must have been some grass or something under the step down here. And then a space and probably the edge of the next step on the top. Up to you. I think I might just make it all the same and not worry about those areas, so that the whole thing will just have this lovely textured background. So we don't have to worry about the background at this stage, because what we're focusing on with the charcoal is the leaf and the shadow. So let's just draw that up into our quarters, and then we'll be able to study the tone, etc. So looking at your coloured picture, look at where, what we're doing is we're looking for where the leaf intersects these lines, okay? So it's actually not very far up inside this top left quarter here. We'll start here, because I'm left-handed probably. But if you can even use a ruler to measure, so you could say, look at this and say that's 7 centimetres, halfway is 3.5, it's about there. So this would be maybe just above a quarter up inside on that line. So if I find my halfway mark over here, and I can say it's a little bit higher than a quarter, so I reckon about there is where that section of the leaf intersects the line, okay? And then coming over to where it intersects this line, this halfway line that runs across, again, you can use a ruler or you can just do it by eye. So halfway is about there. So it's just slightly short of halfway. So if halfway over here is there, then I'm going to make it about there. That's where my intersections are on my line. So that bit's done. Then you can kind of look at this shape and think, all right, so that comes down a little bit like that. So we're looking at half a triangle here, or actually the negative space of this is like a triangle. Can you see that there? So we go down and then we go up a little bit. Not quite as high as that, but a slight bit. So that's that section there. And then we can look at the edge of this leaf. It's got like a jagged edge. It's not straight. and it has a little bumpy line, and then it comes to here. So where is this point in here? And again, you can use your ruler to work that out. So we can say it's probably about a quarter of the way in. I should get rid of that line there. One moment. On the kneadable eraser and just remove this extra line that I drew in before. Gets confusing otherwise. So I can say it's probably about there, where that point comes to, the side or the tip of the leaf. So now we've got some points that we can kind of join up. So we can come from over here where we've got that little triangle, do a little jagged line like that and end there at the point. And then come down like this and around, and then it comes in and then back out just there. So now we've got that part of the drawing done. Okay, so that's how I like to measure things up when I'm doing them and using a grid. So now we can come across to the top right quarter and we can have a look in here, and you can see that there's not much leaf in this section. It's all shadow. Okay, so we're going to draw in the leaf part first. So we want to look at where that intersects on this bottom section here. So again, you can measure if you like. I can find my halfway mark, and then I can say, well, that intersects just inside my halfway mark. So halfway is about there. So say about there-ish. I say ish a lot. And then that line just literally comes from there to there, doesn't it? So we have a little triangle of a leaf in that corner there. So a little jagged line just coming across like that. So that's basically the shape of that. And then we've got the stem. So the stem comes up. Again, we can measure. I'm measuring, I don't usually measure, but I'm doing it for you if that's how you like to work. So again, I can say, well, that's say 7-ish, 3.5. So it's about halfway up actually, which is good to know. So that's the halfway mark there, which I could have worked out from here, but anyway. So let's say about to there, because I've got my halfway mark already put in from before. So to there. So, and how far in from the side does it come? So again, you can measure if you want to. So it's just over halfway. So if my halfway here is 3.5, it's about there. So that's the point where the branch or stem comes to. And then I can just sort of bring that down to the center or just below center here. So that's our point there where the little stem joins the leaf. Come down, give it a little curve, just so it looks a bit more natural. And that's basically where the stem sits. And it's not very thick, so you can just thicken that up a little bit if you want to, that line. So that's the stem. Now we can look at the shadow. The shadow is really interesting. So you can see this shadow here. The line here runs almost horizontal from about there across to here. Now look at the negative space. This is cool. I can see a triangle in here. So in between the stem and the shadow of the stem, there's a very distinct triangle there. So that's good to know. We can come down from there and draw our triangle in. And again, it's got a little bend in it because that's the shadow of the stem. Okay. And here where the leaf meets the stem in the shadow, dips down a little bit. So coming across like that, that's our shadow line. Can you see where I'm going with that? And then we bring this section up here. So it comes up above that halfway mark. So that's a little high section there. So see that beautiful triangle just there with a little dip at the base. And then this comes in a curve and comes in and then out again, and it intersects the line at around about there. That's the shadow. So we can come down like this, curve it in, and then bring it out to there. And that's pretty much all we need to put into that section. So it looks a bit weird at the moment because it's just lines, but that's what we're focusing on, is getting the lines in here, the outline of everything, and then we can start to block it in with some tones. Okay, so now we'll move down into this part. Let's continue the leaf first, and then we'll come and do the shadow shape. So this leaf comes down to, I wouldn't say halfway, maybe a third. Halfway is here. So about a third of the way down. So if you find your halfway mark, a third would be about there. So it come to about there-ish. So just put a little mark where that comes to. That's the little peak here. And then it comes up in a triangle and it comes down, and this bottom peak of the leaf sits, I would say, probably a third up. Halfway. Yeah, about that. So about to there. And it's got a nice little tip on it there. The tip sits just inside this grid mark. Okay, so now we've got that information in here. We can go, all right, so the tip of it goes, that tip there goes to there. And then it comes in again. So there's another little triangle there. You can see the triangle with the shadow underneath it. It's not perfectly straight, but it's definitely a triangular shape. So always look for shapes when you're doing this. It'll help you get your drawing in the right spot. So let's join the dots. Let's join from the grid line here in the middle, coming down and then down into this little point here. That's the point of the, probably a maple leaf. I've got a gazillion of them outside actually. Had to go to Bundanoon to find this one. And then up. And then we come down and see there's a little jagged bit there, and it sort of comes in like that and then to the point. So it's sort of something like that. That's the shape of the leaf. Now, I don't know, I think that's just a little hole in the leaf here. Looks like a water drop, could be a water drop. And there's another little mark about there, little dark mark there. You don't need to put those in if you don't want to. I think it makes the leaves look more authentic with a little bit of, you know, mark or stain or something imperfect on them, but up to you. But it's just good to mark those in to sort of see where they sit. So we've got the tip of that one down to there. Now we can look at the shadow. So you could bring the shadow down. You can see the base of the shadow over there is just a little bit higher than the tip of this part. So we can go slightly higher to about there. And then it dips in here and it comes down there. So let's draw the shadow in now. So little jagged lines and around, and then it dips in to about there. And again, down through here and then up under the leaf, down to there. So that's the shadow shape. Nice. Okay, so that's that section done. So now we can move over into the last quarter, bottom left, and we can finish off the shapes. So let's look at this one. Let's see where the tip of this leaf comes to here. Let's say it's just above halfway. Yep. So if halfway is there, it'll be up to about there. So I can say it's about here. And it's not too far in from the edge of the page, so about to there. And then we have the V shape that comes up again through here, or the triangular shape. So the edge of the leaf comes over into this quarter and it comes up to about that height. So where is that in relation to this? So that's there. So this one's a little bit higher than that. So it comes up to about there. So then we can draw our line through like that. And then down to about there. So this section here comes a little bit lower than that point there, doesn't it? So down to there, and then it's got to come up a bit across and then up. So it's sort of like that. And then we come up from the top here and we can join up the edges here, like so. I think I've gone too low just there. I'll go up a little bit higher. I'm just looking at the level of that bottom of the leaf, how it sits on the step like that. That's better. So that's basically our leaf shape and shadow. And we've got a little bit of shadow under this section here as well. So we can darken that off through there. Okay. Good. So that's our drawing done. It's really valuable to take the time to get the drawing right. Even for something simple like this, it's really important because it helps you, A, to study the thing that you're going to paint and you get really familiar with it. But it's also important because if you don't get the drawing right, then the whole thing will be off. So you've got to get the drawing right from the very start. And I'm incredibly impatient. I just want to get in and play with my pastels and colours. And I have to force myself to make sure I get the drawing right. So it's really important to do that because it'll give your art the perfect finish rather than, you know, getting to the end of, we've all done it. You get to the end of your painting and you think, it's not right. I can't work out why. And often it'll be the drawing. And by then it's too late. You can't go back. So make sure you focus on that and get your drawing right at the beginning. It's well worth spending the time. So let's just shade this in gently. We won't spend too much more time on this because the drawing was the most important part. But I just want to grab my short, fat bit of charcoal now, and we're going to block in the shadow. Now, the reason we're doing that, and we'll do it the same order in the pastel, you always start at the back and work forward because it's much easier with pastel to do that because it's such a fragile, messy medium. It never dries or sets, and so it's always loose. And if you can work from back to front, it'll make your life a whole lot easier. So grab your short, fat bit, and I'm not lying it flat on the paper because it's too fat for that area. Really, it's too big to really lie flat properly. But you can tilt it and just use one end. And if it's a wider end than your thin stick, then you'll get a nice coverage. So what I want to do is just darken off this shadow now, make it really dark as you can with your charcoal. Willow charcoal is not as dark as other charcoals, so you will find that it may not be as dark as you like, but that's okay. So we're just going to darken this off. It's all practice before we do the real one. I call it the real one when I do it in colour. However, if you fall in love with charcoal, it is a beautiful medium. And you can create some amazing work with charcoal. Okay, so filling all that in, working your way around the picture. Down through here. And then the other little bit of shadow that's under this section here in the bottom left quarter. It's important to get your shadows right, otherwise it won't look right. So that's my black shadow area. Now, if you've gone over some areas that you want to remove or take off, then feel free to do that. And don't forget the stem up here. That's a nice dark section too. So just blocking in that area there. Now I've just noticed, okay, that's cool. So see on the picture, there's a little light bit just there in the shadow. So that is the hole here. There's a little hole there And there's a light bit there. That's a bit cute, isn't it? So how fun. We can actually darken off inside this little hole. Just a little slit it is, just a little shape in there. And then, because we haven't got a white, well, I have a white pencil, but it probably won't work very well on the willow. Oh, might work all right, but you can use either a white charcoal pencil or use your kneadable eraser just to put a little dot on there and take it off. Just that makes it a bit more interesting. I didn't notice that before. How cool. So a little hole. Coolio. All right, now what we want to do is just mark in where the stem sits. So you can see I've filled all this area in here because I needed to darken it, but we need to just lighten it slightly to show the stem and where that joins onto, went in the wrong angle then, where it joins onto the leaf. So if you get your kneadable eraser, this is really good for removing charcoal and just getting some white back in there. So you can just continue that down to here and pull that across to there. So it kind of looks like it's all together, sort of. I know it's not quite that light in the picture, but you can just go over it lightly like that to sort of make it a bit more grey. Now, in the leaf, because this is a light coloured leaf and it's on a mid-coloured background with a dark shadow, we'll just focus at the moment on getting some tone in here. So looking at your black and white version, this is where we want to look at that, because the black and white version will tell us where the tones are. So if you have the picture nearby, up close, then you can zoom straight in, or you can look at your picture here on the notes, and you can see that it's got very subtle little grey tones all the way through it. So what I want to do is just softly sweep over it with my short, fat bit of charcoal and give it a bit of a light to mid-tone. So then I can come in and I can add more dark for the darker bits and take out some of it for the lighter bits where I want the light to be quite bright. So we need to get something down there first to work with. So let's put that in now. Once you've done that, how about we just blend this in with our fingers to get a nice sort of smoothish coverage. Lovely, lovely. Okay, so now we've got something to work with, and it's the same theory with pastels. You can't do anything until you've got some pastel on the paper, basically. So we need to have something to work with, because now we can do things like, look at where the light is in this leaf. Now I can see there's a lovely little bit of light right on this tip here. So you can use your kneadable eraser to get some of that back in. Okay. And we've got a bit of light over on the other tip on the left-hand side. There's a nice bit of white or light through there. So now what I'm going to do, can you see along the ridge of that vein? So we could draw the vein in first, actually, and then we can go over it if we need to. So there's a vein in each of these three parts of the leaf. Okay. So this part, they all stem from where the stem comes. And this one comes across here like this, and it's not always perfectly straight. It comes across like that from the stem to the tip. Okay, so we can do that for each one. Don't press too hard. We just want a very soft, light indication of where the vein sits. And now I've put my vein in, I've realised I've got my hole in the wrong spot, but that's okay. I can just dab that with my eraser and take it out. So the little hole goes about there. Something like that. All right, now Now we're going to look at the shading, okay? So we need to look at the tones. We're going to go a little bit darker where it's darkest, and then leave some of the mid, and then take some out where it's lightest. So over here, let's have a look. We'll start at the top section. Through here, there's a little bit of darker tone through there. It's only very subtle, but this helps you to really study the picture and work out where your darker and your lighter and mid tones are. Okay, and it's very subtle, so we just want to do it softly, softly. And if you've gone too dark, you can always just pat it with your finger and soften it off a little bit. So just go softly, softly. What we're trying to do now is create the contours and the texture of the leaf so that it actually looks like a solid object and not a drawing. Okay, and to get that to work, you absolutely have to have tones, all right, because that creates your shadows, your folds, all the things that give something the look of being solid. Down on this side here. So just wandering around this with your bit of charcoal. We're not doing the other vein marks just yet. And just creating a really nice blend of darks and lights. Down in this section, there's a nice little fold. So it's not that dark, but it's darker than the other parts. So you can see where the edge of this one folds up a little bit. So I'm just going to darken that off even more. And don't be afraid to exaggerate sometimes too. That's what makes art more interesting, is exaggerating things. So, you know, if something needs a little bit more punch, then don't be afraid to give it a bit of punch. All right, so I'm just going to soften up these. Now, notice where the veins are. Let's have a look at this one here on the right. See that vein there? It's got a light line running down, and then there's a darker shadow beside it. So because we know the light's coming from where's it coming from? Coming from this way. So bottom left. Okay. So the light's hitting on here and casting the shadow. So always figure out where your light's coming from. So then you can work out where you need to cast more shadows. So because this vein is poking up, basically, so it sits up high, higher than the rest of the leaf, it sort of has a little ridge basically across there. But it's got shadow. So you've got to start to look for the subtleties. It's got shadow on the right-hand side of that vein. The vein's actually quite light. So what I've done is I've put a soft sort of mark down here. This is where your little short fat bit comes in handy, because you can do sort of just soft little wider marks that aren't a hard line. And then just push that across a little bit like this so that it sort of blends in a bit. Okay. What we're aiming to make now is a shadow on the ridge, and the ridge is lighter. So now we can get your kneadable eraser and make like a knife edge with it, squeeze it until you get a very thin knife edge that you can pull down and draw with. So I'm going to pull that down through here. And you might need to have a couple of goes at it and draw with it so that it comes down like that. And what happens when you do that is the eraser picks up the charcoal off the paper, so it gets really dirty. So you have to knead it again to find a clean edge. That's why it's called kneadable. Not because we need it, but because we've got to knead it like we do bread. Knead, K-N-E-A-D. So just pulling that down, lightening that up a little bit. And then on this side, on the left side, it's lighter through there. So I'm just going to pull that across with my finger. I'm getting the pad of my finger up against the light vein mark and just pulling that charcoal across so it softens off that edge a little bit. Now, see how that now looks like it's popping up? Because I've got the dark down there, which I put in first with the charcoal, and I blurred it and softened it. And then I took some out, and it's not a perfectly straight or even line, which is kind of cool because that's not what we want. We want this to look really natural. So I took it out with my eraser down through here. And then if you soften off, so put the pad of your finger, and we'll do this with pastel too. You got to get the pad of your finger, start at the edge of that line and just pull it across like that. And what that does is it kind of puts the light onto the right side of the left side of the vein where we want it. And we've got the dark on that side. So it's looking like a little ridge now. So this is how you create texture. Now we're going to continue across here. So over here, can you see there's veins coming off these main veins. Now on the right-hand side, they're a little darker, again, because they're on the darker side and they're not catching the light. So we can draw those in with charcoal. I've just grabbed my longest skinny stick because I want to do finer lines. And I don't want to press too hard. I still want to keep it looking quite natural. So just drawing those in softly like that. Okay. And then I'm just going to dab them because I don't want them to be too obvious. Just dabbing them like that. So if you want something to disappear a little bit, just don't rub it because you'll lose the whole thing. But if you just dab it with your finger like this, it'll help you to kind of push it in and soften it off without completely losing those lines. So they're still there, but not very much. They're quite indistinct, really. But on the other side, it's the same kind of deal. So over on this side here, I'm going to start with my dark because I want to get a little bit of shadow just on the bottom side of that vein. So if I come in here with a bit of dark, not too much, don't go too dark because we just want to keep it pretty light. Okay, so I'm just doing soft marks through here, hardly touching it, just really soft and gentle, like that. See how I've got the veins marked in there? And then I can come back in. I'm just going to dab again because, again, I don't want them to be too strong. Then I can come in with my eraser and I'm going to just touch that main vein up a little bit because I drew over it in a couple of spots to get the light back in there. And it's the same thing on these smaller veins. So I've got to shape my eraser. You can always use a white pencil too, let's see if that'll work. Sometimes it won't work with this willow charcoal because it's so soft. Not as effective. So what I'm going to do is draw a little line in here with my eraser, and hopefully that's going to give me those little raised up veins running down through there. Now it's a bit too much, but I can come in and soften that off again, just dabbing. See how that's starting to look like it's got some volume. I'm just dabbing. Ah, lovely. Amazing, isn't it? How the shadow and the light really make something pop or look like it's a solid object. It's just so exciting when you get it right. So have a little play with that. It's quite fun. I'm going to just tidy up this end bit here. I need a bit more shadow on the tip of my leaf where the vein comes down. So I'm just going to darken off in there a little bit more and then lighten off again with my eraser all the way to the tip. So now that's looking much more solid. And that's the kind of thing we're going to be doing with pastels as well. So you might have looked at this when you received your notes and thought, oh gosh, so basic. But yes, it is basic, but we're learning about texture and how to create that with your shadows and your lights. So I think it's a really good lesson, this one, because we're just learning so much valuable stuff that we can then apply to other things. Okay, so now I'm just going to look at the tip of this leaf or part of this leaf that needs a little bit more light. So you can see, again, some of this might be risen up, like have a little bump in it or something that's catching a bit more light. So just dabbing with my eraser to get more light back in to some of these spots. So that's why we put that first layer of charcoal down, so then we can take some off and start creating the beautiful brights and lights. So just on the edges, shape your eraser to get those lovely sharp edges in there. Okay. And we're not using erasers when we do pastel. We'll be using sticks, obviously, pastel sticks in different colours. But I don't know, I just love working with charcoal. It's such a beautiful medium. Lovely. So you can kind of just fiddle around with that and highlight the lightest parts. And then keep moving around your picture. So what we might do, rather than finish that off, because it's going to take a little bit too long, I think, we might have a little break and then we'll come back and we'll get started on the pastel colour version. If you want to keep going and finish this off, by all means do. It's such a lovely practice and it's a really good way to, again, get familiar with your picture. So you can see how easy that is, can't you? Just to make that little ridge pop up. I've just done it over here quickly. So again, I had a dark line and a little bit of light just to the left of it. There's a lot of light on the tip of this part of the leaf. So it's almost like it's folding down. And then over here on the bottom part, it's got a little bit more light there too. So you can kind of almost feel the texture of it. And that's what we want to achieve, is the beautiful texture of this leaf. It's lovely to study things like this and just really get intimate with them. It's why I love doing those blossoms. I love zooming in on things and getting really up close and looking at all the detail. So we might leave it there for now. And as I said, if you want to finish that off and keep going, by all means do. And we'll come back shortly and get stuck into the pastel. So I can't help myself. I've got to keep going. All right. And don't forget, we've got that little dark mark there too, so you can mark that in. We've got our little hole over here. Can mark that in. Imperfect it is. There's lots of little dots and spots and things on this leaf too. Quite beautiful. It's beautiful. All right. So I shall leave you there and we'll go and have a 10-minute break. So I'll stop recording for a moment. And okay, so we are about to get started on the colour version of this. So I've put the colours here that I've chosen so far. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't add other colours, but I always like to start off with a kind of limited palette, I guess, so that you're not overwhelmed with too many colours. And sometimes I don't use them. Sometimes I use all of them. Sometimes I go grab more or replace them. So, but it's a good place to start anyway. So what I've got here is a white. I've got a very light apricot kind of orange. And then there's a kind of creamy colour, a very light yellow or a cool yellow. Cool because it looks more white. It's got more white in it. And a warm yellow, which is a bit dirty, so it's hard to see. But that's got a little bit more red in it, so it's a warmer colour. Orange, beautiful bright orange. I got an earthy kind of reddish brown colour there. Then I've got a dark brown and I've got green and I've got, hoping that's blue violet. It's hard to tell sometimes. I think it is. Usually this is blue violet dark. So usually I put them in with all my black pastels and then I can't find them. So I'm pretty sure that's a blue violet. It's got quite a dark purple tinge to it. So sometimes it's hard to determine what it is, but it's a wonderful color for shadows and for darks. It's also very soft usually. Art Spectrum make it, and you can get a beautiful dark purple in lots of brands. They might not have the same name, but they're a similar tone. They're just a bit warmer than a black, I find. So they're my colors. Now, what I've done is I've put them in order from light to dark, because again, it's really important to get your tones sorted out. So I'm going to pop this aside. I draw it in my charcoal. We won't be needing that now for till next week. Grab my paper. So I've got a terracotta paper today, because it's similar to the colours in my picture. And it means I might not have to do quite as much work to get the background to look like what's in the picture. If you don't have this colour, then something earthy in a brown or even a grey would be nice. But something in that sort of warm autumny kind of colours if you can. If not, don't stress. It's all good. We're not actually going to worry too much about the background. We'll do a little bit of texture on there for the background, but I'm not going to get too much into it today because I think we need to focus on the actual leaf. So if you do have a colour that you're happy with and that your leaf will stick out on, so the thing to think about here when choosing your paper colour, if you're not going to fill the background in, is to make sure that the colours in the leaf will sit out on top of the colour you choose, and that the dark will be darker than the colour. So if you've chosen black, that's not going to work unless you fill the black in with all this terracotta behind it first.
That's not too light, is it, Jeanne? I don't know if you can see that.
Let me see.
Not very good.
I don't think I can see anybody. Where's all our pictures gone? Can't see the people. I can see the chat and the participants.
That's all right. It's a little bit lighter terracotta than yours, or I've got a darker one. Do you think I'm better off with lighter or darker?
Let me have a look. Show me. No, that'll be fine, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be fine. No worries. Anyone else got questions while we're here? Christine, I can't hear you. Unmute you. There we are.
I've just got a dark brown.
Dark brown's great, Lynn.
Yeah, sort of a brownish. Thanks.
Christine, yours looks fine. You've got a grey.
Yeah.
That should be fine. And Susan looks like she's good. So all good. All right. Lovely. We might not do the background then if you're happy to not bother with that today, and we'll just get on with the leaf. Can't hear you, Susan. She's still muted. Okay. All right. So let's not worry about the background and let's just focus on doing the leaf, because we've all got a colour that will work quite well. Okay. So as I said, you want something that's not too dark and not too light. Though lighter would be better than too dark, because we need to be able to make sure we can see the shadow, is what I'm getting at with the darkness. All right. So I've picked out a terracotta colour and we're working in portrait today. So that means you need to have your paper going in this direction, which is okay. And I like to either tape my paper down onto my board or pin it. So I have been pinning lately on my easels. I find that's a bit easier. And I use a gator board underneath it, which I can pin into. So if you've got something you can pin into, that's helpful. Otherwise, just taping is fine. I'm just taping my corners because I'm working flat and it's a short exercise, so it's not going to be here for days. I'm just going to tape the corners down. The reason we do that is just so that it keeps your paper nice and flat and in one spot, and you don't have to keep holding it with your other hand, which is really annoying. So you've got a spare hand. So this blue tape is really handy. I think it's painter's tape. It's called 48-hour tape or something, or just regular masking tape will do. Some people find the blue a bit distracting if it's all the way around the picture. A lot of people said, oh, I can't choose my colors well if I've got a big blue band around everything. So that's a personal choice. I like this stuff because it's not quite as tacky as masking tape, and therefore it's less likely to tear when you take it off. However, I don't stick it down too hard, but you will find, especially if you've got this beautiful color fixed paper, which is what we like to use in classes, it's got this white border, which is just plain paper. So if you tape around there and pull it off, it can often tear, and sometimes it'll tear all the way into your painting. So if you do put your tape around the edges of your paper, I like to sort of stick it onto my clothing or something first, just to get some of the stickiness off, so it's not quite too adhesive. Pop it around softly, sort of gently, don't push it on too hard. And then when you take it off, if you're peeling off down the side, peel away from the painting. So peel not in towards it, but out away from it. That way, if it is going to tear, it'll tear out and not in. Because I wrecked an entire painting doing that once. You only do it once. You learn the hard way. Okay, so we're working in portrait. The other thing I wanted to show you about tone, just before we go any further, if you can't work out what tone a colour is or what order to put these in, then a really good way is either looking at them through your eyelashes. So you kind of squint through your eyelashes, and that should help you see things a little bit more black and white. The other cool thing is to use red cellophane. So I was told this a lot. I'll try and see if I can get it all the way up to there. Now see, if you look through red cellophane, it turns everything into black and white kind of, or tone at least. So you can actually see light to dark through there. So a little bit of red cellophane. This piece is years old. Probably should buy some new stuff. But it's just a good way to look at your pastels and determine your lights from darks. So red cellophane, very helpful if you're trying to figure that out. All right, so pop your pastels to the side. Now, first thing we want to do is draw this up again. So we've already done it once, so we should be familiar with it. And I like to use either charcoal or a pencil, pastel pencil, or this is actually a white charcoal pencil. If your paper isn't too dark, then go for your willow charcoal to draw with, because it's easy to take off. So I'll show you if I draw hard with that, with my white pencil. And then have I got another light pastel pencil handy? It's a dark one. And if I draw with, this is a pastel pencil, okay? And then I do it with charcoal, which is a softer mark anyway. I'll just show you how hard they are to remove. So I get my kneadable eraser. I can take the charcoal off, no problem. See how that comes off, nice and easy. The pencil, not so much. Bit harder to get off. I'm rubbing pretty hard, still leaving a mark. The white, again, still leaves a mark. So that's why I prefer charcoal, because I can take it off easily. It's a beautiful soft medium and it won't stain my paper. I'll put that in the middle because I know I'm going to cover it up with a leaf. So just you know, for future reference. All right, so we're going to grid up our page like we did before. Find your halfway mark. If you're on the colour fixed paper, then your halfway will be 11.5 on the short end, because it's 23 across. So 11.5 is about halfway. Draw your line down there, again with charcoal, because it'll be easier to remove. And 15 is halfway the other way. Okay. And then rule your line across there. So you've got your halfway mark across like that. Cool. The other thing I like to do is just mark my halfway lines in my border if your border's not covered up, or if you've got tape on there, you can do it on the tape. Just so if you need to find those lines later and you've filled everything in with pastel, you can still indicate, you know, find the indicators on the edges to work out where things need to be. Groovy. All right, so now we've got to draw this baby up again. Same as before, exactly the same process, but we won't be doing the shading with charcoal. So we just want to get the outlines in. So again, let's work out where this sits within the grid. So I've got my halfway line. And again, if you wanted to, you could literally draw up another grid line, find your halfway mark, or just mark in your halfway lines if that's easier for you. And that can help you to get everything into the right spot. So you can go halfway there, and what's half of 11 and a half? 5 and something, about there. About there. So they're kind of the halfway marks, and that's where you could potentially put more grid lines if you wanted to. But I won't worry about more grid lines at this stage. So let's find where the tip of this intersects our line. So it's about there. So it's about just a little bit below the halfway mark. And then it dips down. So we've done this once already. And when you've done something once already, it means you can do it the second time a little bit easier or quicker. So I'm just going to find my points and my intersections. So this is the point here on the left of where the leaf comes to. This is where it intersects with the grid line halfway down. We've got this little triangular shape here. So we come from the point there and down, and then it comes across in a little sort of a jagged shape like that. So that's that leaf. And then we come down here and we come around, and then it goes down like that. So that's that section done. Just press lightly. The lighter you press, the easier it'll be to remove your marks if you need to take them off later. And then we'll come over to the other side. So again, I can work out this intersects here. So it's just inside that halfway line, the edge of the leaf. And it's not a straight line, but it's kind of sort of got a bit of a curve and a bit of wobble in there. That's basically where the leaf comes to on that side. And then we've got this beautiful shadow. We've got our stem, which crosses through the intersection here on our page, up through there. And then it comes up to the halfway line, doesn't it? We worked that out before, and a little bit to the side. So about to there and down to here. So we've got to join those dots, do a slight curve so it looks a little bit natural. That's our stem. Then we can work on the shadow. So the shadow line comes across like this. Remember that lovely triangle that we had here? Up through there. And then down. And down through there. So something like that. And then we've got the stem shadow. So that forms the triangle edge there. The stem comes that way. So I'm just drawing really lightly. The other thing I like to do when I'm drawing like this with a long stick of charcoal is holding it on the end. So don't hold it like that, like you would a pen or a pencil, because it limits your movements. It means you've got to put your hand down on the paper and you're just doing little marks like that. Whereas if you hold it loose on the end, it loosens you up and it helps you to have a more natural sort of line or drawing. So just keep your hand nice and loose. If you want to rub anything out, you can do that with your eraser as you go. We'll take the lines out afterwards and all the things that we don't want to have on our finished piece. Anywho, let's carry on. So we've got to come down here. We've got to bring the tip of this part of the leaf to about there. So it's about there-ish. So that's not a straight line, but it sort of joins to there. Not perfectly straight. We can work on the edges later. And then up a little bit. And then the tip of that comes down below the halfway mark to about here, I would say. So then we can draw our line down to there. Like that. Lovely. And then that kind of goes off the edge up through into the next section. We can continue our shadow down. So it comes down in a little shape like that, and then it comes up to there, and then it comes down and across to there. Now I need to maybe extend this part of the leaf out a little bit further to meet that shadow. Okay, beautiful. So that's our shadow shape drawn in. Very good. And then we can move across and finish off this final border. So you can see that that tip of the leaf comes to about the halfway mark, about there. So then we can draw our shape down. Remember, it's not a straight line. It kind of curves out and then back in again to the tip. And then the V of that leaf comes up about there, yep, above the halfway line. So it's about a third of the way in from the middle, down, joining up with this guy, and then across and out like that. So that's our basic leaf shape, all put in, ready to go. And we've got our little bit of shadow under this section here too. We can mark that in as well. So now we've pretty much got everything in that we need to have in. Just tidy up your lines, check your shapes, make sure everything's where it's got to be. Check your halfway marks and your intersections, make sure that they all align with what's happening in the picture and the grid lines. Cool. So that's about all we need to do at this stage. The first part of this, if we were going to do the background, we would do that now, do that first, and then we'd work forward. Like I said earlier, it's much easier to work forward. However, we're going to rely on our paper color today. If you're more advanced, if you've got the time, if you have prepared earlier and you want to do the background, by all means do it. It is a beautiful texture. It was an old concrete step that had been painted, but you can see all the cracks and grooves and stuff in it.
So Jeannie, if you are doing the background, would you come over the leaf that little bit? You wouldn't do the whole lot of it. Would you just come over the leaf so that when you put the leaf in, it doesn't look like you've joined it on, sort of?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because what you don't want is a halo around the outside of it. So yeah, if I was doing the background, I'll just show you. Say I was doing it this color, I would literally come in, to there.
Yeah.
And carry on outside of that. So you will lose your outline.
That's what gets me worried when I lose my outline. Yeah, so I've got to get better at that. I'm scared.
Yeah. And I guess that is one of the problems with pastels is that, if you do the background, then you lose all that drawing, which is another reason to keep rehearsing it, which is, but you don't have to come over too far. You just enough so that you don't have a gap between the background and the leaf. So
Thank you.
All looks like it's connected. Are you going to do the background?
I will, I think, yeah, but I won't do it now. I'll do it later.
Yeah, you can do it later.
I'll see how I go. Yeah. The leaf's going to be challenging anyway.
You can do it the other way around. In this kind of picture, it would be reasonably easy to do the background last because, you put all your stuff in and then you go around it. The tricky bit's getting into the corners, like, the bits there, for example. But then you'd probably have to come back in again and tidy up the edges of your leaf, to get it sharp. I've lost your voice again.
Can you wet that outside area a little bit to give it a more definite line rather than have it just smudged? Like, could I go over it with a little wet paintbrush and wet that pastel or that maybe?
Yeah, you could. Yeah. And that's a great way to set colour in pastels. We might do that at some point. But say I I learnt this when I did a workshop with Trisha Taylor. She does a lot of beach scenes and rocks and waves and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So her secret was, because it's always, you know, if you do a big black rock and you want the wave on top of the rock and all the white foam, etc. And
Yes.
if you put your black pastel down or your dark pastels and then put your white over it, it's not bright enough because it blends with the black underneath.
It looks a bit milky, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets really dirty. So what she showed us was actually putting the pastel down on the rock and then washing it in with water,
Right.
brush and water, wetting it in, let it dry, and then it sets. So it's not going to move and mix in with your other colours that you put over the top. So that's a really great thing to remember. And I have used that a couple of times when I've wanted to get the brights. I think it was a blossom picture, and it was, you know, there was a yellow blossom or something, and I wet it, and then I could get my really bright whites to pop on top. So definitely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good
Thank you.
idea.
So when would you use water and when would you use the fixative?
So water I would use for that instance, like I just explained, to make something set. And it would only be used in like the bottom layer, basically, because you can do underpaintings. So for instance, we could literally do an underpainting with watercolor on this, do the leaf colors and the darks and things with a watercolor or an acrylic, let it dry, and then bang pastel over the top. So water is great to do underpaintings with, whereas fixative, I find, is best to use in between layers. So when you're putting lots of layers on something, you know how you can't kind of get more on because it's too full and you can't get those brights back. That's when fixative is really great, because you can spray it and fix everything.
All of it, yep.
Or even just one little section, and then come back over it, and it will allow you to add more pastel over the top. I often do that where I want to sign my name, because often it's so chunky with pastel, I can't get a pencil to work, you know, because pencils are harder, and so they often won't stick over the pastel. So sometimes I'll fix that part of the bottom of the painting where I want to sign it, and then just use my charcoal pencil, usually, because charcoal's a bit softer. So charcoal white is really good to sign with. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. All right, we shall soldier on. Thanks for all the questions. I really appreciate that. It's good to, know what you're thinking. Awesome. So let's put down the shadow first, because that's the darkest part and it's also underneath the leaf. And it's the thing that's going to make it pop. So grab your blue violet pastel. You can see I've got a really short piece here. I tend to break all my long ones because they're easier to hold. I tend to lie them flat most of the time on my paper to fill in. And when I want to do finer detail, I'll use the sharp edges. So a short fat piece is much easier to manage. Okay, so we need to look at where the shadow comes from, and literally just wiping on your pastel like this. If you've got a dark blue violet like this, and it's an Art Spectrum brand, it'd probably be quite dusty. So this is very dusty. You can see there's a fair bit of dust gathering. So I just want to mark in, don't go right to the edge because we can tidy that up at the end, but just try to get a bit on there. What we're going to do is push our fingers in there and fill up the paper with the pastel. So you put one layer down like that, and then get a finger and literally just rub it in. And because this is such a strong, dark, crumbly kind of pastel, it should fill up pretty quickly. If you've got a harder pastel, you might have to try a couple of coats, like put one layer down and rub it in, and then put another layer on the top. That will all depend on the kind of pastel you've got, and how soft or hard it is. Now I've got a lot of dust. I'm going to sort of overlap the edges of my leaf here because I want a really sharp edge between that dark shadow and the edge of the leaf. Now getting into that pointy bit will be the tricky part because our fingers are not pointy. Do your best. It's hard to get those sharp pointy edges nice and crisp. Okay, so now you've got a finger that looks like that, or maybe a couple. So this is where a little hand towel is really helpful. Forgot to wet mine today. Maybe I'll dip it in my water. But if you have a little towel and wet at one end, then you can wipe your finger literally clean and start again. So I'm just going to dunk this in my glass of water so I can get my fingers reasonably clean, especially if you're going from dark to light colours. You don't want to be putting dark into lights if you've got dirty fingers. So it's like cleaning brushes, really. Just imagine your fingers a brush. So now I've got a little bit of a wet towel. I can give it a wipe, get it reasonably clean, dry it on the other end. So just wet one end and keep the other end dry. And that way you'll be able to clean your fingers off in between. Not that we really need to at this point because we're still using gum. What I'm going to do is tip my dust off. So because I'm working flat, which is not the way I like to work, but it's the easiest thing to do for these classes, I'm going to tip my board up and bang the dust off onto my cloth. Very tempting to blow it. And you can if you like, but it'll just go all over you and the house and the floor and everything else. So easier not to if you can avoid it. So I've tipped all my dust off. In the process of tipping my dust, because this paper feels like sandpaper, it's catching all the little bits of dust as it drops. So you can see down here, as I tipped it in that direction, it's fallen, but it's caught on some of the paper. The paper is like what they call tooth. So the tooth in the paper grips everything. It sort of sticks up. And so wonderful for pastels, but catches the dust. So at the end of the day, if you want to clean up your background or fill it in, which is probably easier, you can actually use your eraser just to get that off. When you do that, try not to rub it, but just dab it like that and keep finding clean sides. And that will eventually clean it all off. It takes a bit of time and patience, but it will work. But just try not to rub it, because if you rub it, it rubs into the paper and kind of sets in there then. Okay, good. So now we've got this really messy edge. So we've got to try and sharpen that up a little bit. What I'm going to do is use the edge of my pastel. And in our picture, you can see the edge is quite jagged. Got this little jagged edge around it. So let's see how we go getting some of that in, plus the stem. So soft little wobbly lines around the edge. Just use the edge of your pastel now. So not the big chunky side, just get an edge and come around and just try to get some of those little jagged edges in, leafy looking edges. The other cool thing would be a pencil if you had one handy. In the same colour, of course, which I haven't. I don't think you can get pencils in this colour. It's probably too soft. Wouldn't be hard enough to make a pencil out of. So you can just sort of carefully run your pastel around the edges like this, try and get the shapes in there. Oh, I forgot the colour in this bit. No sharp lines in this, except for maybe a little bit on the stem. And down through here. And then over on this other side, remember that little bit of shadow on the left under here. Again, just got to get our try to get your edges in. Don't worry about overlapping the leaf, because we can sharpen that up afterwards when we come back with the oranges and browns and things. Okay, and then coming up into this point here. Down through there. Fairly straight through there. And then across here. Just little soft jagged edges. Now, if you have a rubber tip blender, they're really helpful because they can get into these pointy bits and they can kind of smooth things out or blend them in for us. So I'll show you what I mean if I've got one handy. So this kind of thing, you can get them in the art shop. They're about $16 for a set of 6, I think. And they all have different tips on them. I've got a couple here. So you can see that that tip has sort of a round flat end on it. This one's more pointy with a sharp edge. So they're really good to get into these endy bits where your fingers won't go because they're not pointy enough. And you can sort of push it in with this rubber stuff. Some people like to use those paper blenders, but I find the paper ones sort of take the pastel off rather than pushing it in. They're really good for charcoal, but not so good for pastel, I find. But that's just me. So if you have a little blender like this, you can run around the edges and just, what I'm trying to do is just get the pastel to push into the paper so it sticks. Get those nice little leafy edges going on in there. You can see there's a lot of dust. So what I'll do is tip that off again in a moment. It's going to come down through here and blend this bit in. And same here. Blending it makes it stick to the paper. This is going to look really effective once the leaf's done. I love working with shadows. It's just so much fun. So again, just running around the edge with a blender like that. If you don't have a blender, try to get a finger and just sort of push it in as close to the edge as you can. And then I've got to draw in my stem up here. So the stem goes this way. Again, using the edge of the pastel because I just want a small line here. It's got a little dip in it, made it a bit straight, never mind. So that's our stem. And again, your finger's probably going to be too chunky to get in there, but you can get in there with your little rubber tip thing if you have one. If you don't, then maybe grab some next time you're at the shops. I think I've even seen these in the $2 shops, those cheap places. All right. Just looking at this little leaf, there's a shadow on that top. This bit here has got a bit of a shadow there. I don't think it's under it, it's on it. Anyway, groovy. So I'll tip some dust off. That's all staining my paper a little bit, but never mind. So that's our beautiful shadow. How gorgeous is that? I love this dark purple colour. Such a lovely colour for shadows. And if you were doing the background, then you could potentially put some of that markings through there of the texture of the step. And you might use something a little bit not quite so dark. Because in the picture, you can see that the shadow is just a darker shade of the step, really, which is sort of like a dark red almost. Okay, so that's that part done. I'm not going to fiddle around too much more with that because I'll just end up making a big mess. It's a very messy colour, this one. It's dusty and it's dirty and it stains. So give your fingers a clean. And we'll move on and we'll fill in the leaf now. So what I'm going to do is fill the leaf in with a mid colour. So it's kind of not really all one colour, is it? But I'm going to try this mid reddy sort of colour. And we'll just play around with those a little bit and see what we can figure out. So let's put, this is like the red. I don't know whether that's going to be dark enough, but anyway, we'll start with it. Filling in the whole leaf with this, because like the charcoal earlier, we just need to get something on the paper that we can then start to work with. Don't worry too much about the edges just yet. We're just trying to get something on the paper. And then we can start pushing colour around and playing around with some tones and things.
It might be just me and the way I'm looking at it, but that to me looks like a mauvey colour rather than a mauvey like into brown, not a red, but
The one I've got.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
can't seem to find one that sort of looks like that. So
Have you got what else have I got here?
I've got a dark, like a more orangey coloured one, like that one on the top, but that one you've got your hand on now, that looks like a mauve to me, but on the screen.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is a mauvey kind of grey.
Yeah. So
Is it all right to use the mauve? Because I've got the mauvey colour that it
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think so.
Okay.
As long as it's a mid-tone, so again, back to tone, if I look at that through my eyelashes, where's my bit of red foil gone? Let's see, which ones, is one of those darker or are they the same? Yeah, so the orange one is a little lighter.
Lighter, yeah.
But it's still a mid. So if you want to do the orange, we're going to mix it all up anyway.
So okay.
What other colour have you got, Susan?
Can you see me at the moment? I'm just
Yes.
holding. Yeah, I'm holding up that. That's what that looks like to me on the paper. But
I can't see what you're holding up.
Oh, okay. Where's the camera?
To your left, down.
Down.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
So
I reckon that
more like
purple one.
the purple one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it looks like to me too. I was sort of wondering as well.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Good. Thank you for asking. All right. Yeah, so let's do that. And really it's just a mid-tone that we want to get down. Doesn't matter whether it's brown or purple or, you know, as long as it's one of those sort of earthy colours. And just put a light coat on there. And then we'll do the same thing. So we need to get something on here. At the end of the day, you probably won't even see much of this colour because we're going to start to add the oranges and greens and things over the top. But we just needed something to mix with. Okay, so now I'm just going to push this in. Now, as you're pushing it in, go to the edge as much as you can, but try not to go outside the lines. Which is always fun with pastel, isn't it? It's quite difficult to do really sharp lines with pastel sometimes because it's such a soft, crummy, I'm going to say crummy, medium. Dusty. Dusty is better than crummy. So I'm just getting some of this down on my leaf because I want to have a nice background. Okay, so that's a good foundation colour to start with, I reckon. Once you've got that there, then we can start to look at the different colours in the leaf. So I can see some orange. And what I'm going to do is pop orange sort of on all the tips. So a little bit around the tip there. This colour is a little bit lighter than that mid-tone. So just a bit of orange around through here. There's also some red, which I didn't grab, but anyway. Bit of orange through there on this edge here. So what we're doing is we're starting by blocking in the colour. So when you're blocking in, we're just being quite loose. We're not worrying about the detail. We're not getting into all the little nitty-gritty bits yet. Okay, so that'll come, but not quite yet. What we're doing is just getting some colour on here that we can then sort of push around and start to create texture. So a bit of orange on there. I'm going to see if I can get off. Where is my eraser? Oh, there. I can take some of this orange off because it's distracting me. On the outside there. You can also remove your grid lines if you want to. So you can take those off with your kneadable eraser. And hopefully you press nice and light so that they're not going to stain your paper. But when all else fails, just fill in the background and then you won't have to worry about it. All right, so I've got a bit of orange on there. Now I'm going to grab my green and I'm going to zhoosh a bit of green around. So when we mix these colours together, they'll start to create these yummy autumn sort of tones, which is quite beautiful. So kind of sticking with the mid-tones at the moment to get some colour happening in there. So I can see bits of green down through there and bits of reddy orange. Maybe that's why I picked up that reddy colour, because I could see it in the edges. You can come back again with that purple or red that you used first and zhoosh a bit of it around on top if you want to, just to maybe quieten down some of the brights if you don't want it that bright. So just experiment. Okay, and then I'm going to throw a bit of yellow in there. So this is my warm yellow. And I can see some of that down here through the veins. There's some on the tip there. A little bit through the green. I'm wondering if I should get some red. Anyway, I'm just going to, now I've got this darker brown colour. I can see sort of the edges have a bit of this darker brown tone around the edges there. So I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of that in there. So we're just laying colour down, then we can push it in, and then we can start working on the details. So all the veins and things will come after. Layer, layer, layer. That's what pastels is all about. It's about layering when you work in this method, which is the blending way. Of course, there's plenty of other ways you can do it, whether you don't blend and just bang colour down on bold, beautiful, big, bold marks. I think that comes with confidence, to be honest. Or maybe it's just a personality type, but I'm not very good at keeping things really loose. I start off loose and then I can't help myself. I've got to do detail. But we're all different. So see how now I've got a few different colours just kind of plonked in there. I'm not going into the lights just yet. So my lights are this lighter yellow and the creamy colours and the pale orange. I'm kind of waiting to use those later because they're the lights. And I like to save my lights for the end or towards the end. And then I've got all my mids here and then I've got my beautiful dark. Okay, so once you've got some pastel on your paper like that, then I just am going to push it around like this. So what I'm doing is I'm using small little movements with my finger because I'm kind of merging all these colours together. And when we do that, we're going to create these beautiful, soft autumn tones or colours that are all throughout this leaf. Just gently, gently, little soft, little sort of squiggly movements with your finger. Doesn't matter, it's going to go muddy, but we want it to go muddy. So often I say, no, don't go mud, but this is okay. We can be quite muddy today because we've got these beautiful earthy colours to play with. So can you see how that's starting to create a lovely sort of shading from the browns into the yellows and the oranges? This is just layer one, okay? So we've got a long way to go yet. It's not the last layer. Well, sometimes you might do one layer and think, oh, yeah, that's awful. Well, it's not going to be great until you add more. Sometimes it might be great, who knows? It's just knowing when to stop, really, isn't it? Okay, so just zhooshing all these colours in together, creating a lovely blend because we've got something to work with. We've got a foundation to play with. And we can add more over the top and build up the beautiful colours. When you get to the part where you've got the shadow right next to your leaf, just go carefully. We don't want to get too much of that dark into your leaf. zhooshing around, creating a bit of dust. So I'll have to tip that off in a minute. Just slowly traveling around, pushing it in and getting that lovely, lovely orangey sort of autumn colours. Beautiful. All right, tip off my dust. There we go. It's already starting to look like it's got some life, I reckon. So now we've got to this point. Now we're going to start to put more over the top. So I can see this edge here on my leaf is a little bit too straight. So it needs to come in. I'm just going to mark this with my charcoal. It needs to come in about there, which is where my little stem comes to. So I'm going to curl this edge out a little bit further, just so it's not too straight. I'm using my grey purpley colour again, just to give that a little bit of a rounded edge. That's better. Perfect, beautiful. Okay, I am going to go and grab red. I keep looking for red and I haven't got it in my box here, so I'm just going to go and grab a red. So I've got this one. I can see that around the edges. So what I want to do now is just get a little bit of this little stick of red. I'm just going to go around the edges like this. So what I've got a short piece. It's not quite, I'm not holding it not quite flat on my page. So holding it like that, but I'm tilting it up a little bit. So what I'm getting is a sort of a sharper edge, but a wide mark. If I went really to the very edge, then I'd just make a fine line, which you could do in some spots, but not all of it. So what I want to do, I can see this sort of runs around most of the edges. I want to get this in here and just kind of run it around like that and do these soft little squiggly movements as I go, varying the pressure here and there so that you're getting a sort of a more red in some spots than others. See how that's starting to look like a lovely soft line around the edges. So just running around my edges, checking your picture all the time. And if you have a little piece like this, should help you create those jagged edges of the leaf that we want to have, the shapes of it. Once I've done that, I'll show you what I'll do in a sec, but I'm just going to keep going with this for a second. And not everywhere, just like it's not a one continuous line. It sort of breaks up a little bit. So you kind of want to make it look uneven and more natural. So don't do one big hard line. Just do soft little squiggly marks like that and broken line, okay? Once I've done that, I'll show you what I want to do. I'm going to get the pad of my finger like we did with charcoal before and just pull it in from the edge like this. So take the pad of your finger, get it all the way to the edge and then just pull it in and see how that softens that red line and gives it a really lovely edge. So see how you go, see if you can make that work. And I'm hoping I don't have to get back into that edge again. I'm quite liking what that looks like. And if you can keep that edge nice and sharp, like that, and if you feel like you need to change the shape, then pop a bit more on. Just running around gently, and you might, if you've got a pointy tipped blender, that might be helpful when you get to these pointy bits. If not, you'll just have to make them not as pointy as the picture with your fingers. But by putting some of that on the edge and then getting the pad of your finger and softly just putting it down right on the edge and pulling it in towards the leaf, towards the middle of the leaf, then we create a really nice edge. And we're pulling some of that red in without it being very strong, because all the colours in this are quite subtle. Nothing's really strong, is it? It's all quite sort of gentle and subtle. So we're trying to keep our movement or our marking gentle too. Okay. The tricky bit is, I don't know how I'm going to, maybe I'll try my other hand. Well, that's a good idea. So then I'm coming on from the other side, which is tricky because I have to turn my arm around. So I can use my other hand and do the same thing. So again, with the pad of your finger, just on the edge like that, and softly, softly merging that line. Doesn't that look nice? Love that. Cool. So I'll try and do that kind of all the way around. And then you can see there's a fair bit of light on some of those sections. So then we can start playing with a bit more light. But first we've got to get more colour on here. Getting carried away with myself. So same sort of movement around the edge of here. If you don't see red, then don't put red there. If you see orange, make it orange. If you see green, make it green. It could be a bit of everything. It could alternate between those colours. But I'm just really liking what the red does. So it's up to you, personal choice. You could even use that beautiful purpley grey colour that we started with. It's always a lovely mid-tone sort of colour to use in different spots. So I'm just going around softly, softly. You can see there's a bit more of a smudge of red in that section there. So I'm just going to put a bit more down and then I'll push it in. Now in the tip here, I'm going to go for green on this bit. Do the same kind of movement with your green. Gently, gently running around the edges. When you mix red and green, what do you get? Mud. But, oops, that's not such a bad thing for this subject because they are kind of beautiful muddy colours. So sometimes mud is great. So down there I've put some red down this side here, and then I've got a bit of green on the tip because I can't see as much red there. And then I'll run around this side and I can see a bit more red up there. So it's a slow, slow process. Gently, gently. Carefully, carefully. And then I'll start to push in this section down here. So same thing, pad of your finger onto the edge of the painting and pull it in towards the middle. So that way, when you draw a line with your pastel or charcoal and you pull it from one side, you get a lovely soft edge on one side and then hopefully a harder sort of more defined line on the other side. That's the goal, kind of. And what we want to do is get these really sharp edges on top of that shadow so that it looks like it's popping on top. So that's why the shadow is important, because it will make it really pop and jump out of the page at us. So I'm doing the same thing with the green here on the tip. It's a bit tricky to get into that pointy bit. Maybe the little finger will be a better option. And again, just running around the edges like this, pulling in the reds and the greens and whatever colour you've chosen to merge into the other colours when we put them on, put more on. Lovely. Who knew a leaf had so much work in it? So red and green are yummy together. They make the most beautiful browny kind of muddy colours. Gorgeous. And then we can continue around. So you might have to change the way your paper sits or the way you're sitting. That's why it's good when you're on an easel. You actually have a lot more freedom of movement, I find anyway, when I'm standing, because you've got your whole arm, so you can move your whole arm to get different marks. Whereas when you're sitting like this, you're a little bit limited with how much you can move. So again, just running around the edge with my red. Little squiggly marks using the sharp edge. Lift it up on the end, not flat. And just checking your reference photo all the time. I keep checking that, making sure I've got the colours where I want them. Coming across like that. And then I'm going to pop a bit more, kind of a bit of yellowish stuff happening in here. So I'm going to throw a bit of yellow in there on that edge. So to keep your edges a little bit different, maybe, that makes it look more natural. Yellow and orange, red make orange, so that's nice. Cool. And then again, bringing the pad of the finger around and just getting those edges nice and sharp if you can. And pulling it in towards the middle of the leaf. And that purple that we used in the undercoat will give it a lovely sort of shadowy base to put all these other colours on the top. Gorgeous. All right, I'm just going to tip off some dust again. This is why I always work on a cloth or a towel or something, because if you have the dust, you can just pop it on there and shake it outside later. All right, that's looking quite good, I reckon. Okay, now we need to, I think we might pop a bit more colour down onto the actual leaf, and then we can start working on the details. I'm going to throw a bit more red on there, and then I'm going to put orange over the top, and yellows and greens, etc. And don't put your lights in yet, because we're not working in the lights just yet. Put more green on here. So as you build your layers up, what happens is it does what's called glazing, which is a similar process to oil painting. And it kind of shows the colours that are underneath and blends them all, or not always blends, but it just gives it a beautiful depth, I think. Okay, so I'm just popping a bit of green on there. Then I'm going to come in with some orange. Now, this is obviously not going to be exactly the same colours as the leaf in the picture, and that's fine, as long as it works. You know, you don't have to do exactly what you see all the time. The picture really is just a reference. It's just a guide to shape and tone, etc. But you can actually do it in any colour or design that you like. So what, I'm not blending anything in just yet. I'm still sort of just getting some colour on here. I'm looking at the leaf and working out where these blocks of colour need to go. So I'm looking at this middle leaf or middle section. There's a fair bit of yellow that stems out from where the stem is and down on that bottom side of the middle section, and then on the left side of the bottom bit. There's not as much yellow over here on that top part, but there's a little bit there, a smidge of lemon, yellow. Okay. So now I've got another kind of layer of colour sitting on there. And I'm just going to come around the edges a little bit now with my purpley colour that I began with, because I want to sort of mute that down a tad. Okay, so around the edges and then over the other colours a little bit. Because this is such a lovely grey, purpley, muted colour, it's just taking a little bit of the gaudiness or brightness out. Now, if you want to keep the brightness, by all means do. I want to soften it down a little bit so that when I put my lights on, they're going to pop. Plus, we've got to work on those veins soon. So don't forget about them, because we'll have to get our shadows and things happening with the veins. So I've popped some of that purple over the top. I'm just going to gently push now. So as you build up your layers, you want to press less hard, press more softly. And so I'm not pressing really hard. If I press really hard, it'll all sort of merge together and turn into this muddy mess. But if you just go lightly, so what I'm doing is kind of just making all the colours stick together, pressing lightly, but I'm still retaining those subtle shades in there, the differences of shades from the reds to the greens to the oranges, etc. And placing them where I can see them in the picture, in the reference photo. But I'm not pressing hard, so don't press hard. The other thing I'm doing is just pretty much keeping my finger on the page most of the time and running it around softly, softly. So soft little sort of squiggly motion with just this one finger and pushing those beautiful colours in together without pushing too hard. So just go light, nice and light, softly, softly. So as you build up your layers, you go from starting off with big, bold, sort of heavy marks, or not always heavy, and then you work up. And as you work up to the details, you get lighter and softer. So you can see now how that's all starting to blend in nicely together. I've still got my colours there, but they're not too bright. That purpley grey colour makes it nice and mute and kind of a bit more autumny looking. And it looks similar to me to the colours in the picture. So I've tried to have my green down this section here, down through there and on there. So this side and this side have a fair bit of green. There's more of a yellowy tinge through there. Then I've got some reds and purples down the edges through here and on either side of that one and up here. So just, yeah, looking at your colours and trying to get them in where they fit. So I'll tip off my dust again. Lovely. Okay. So now we're going to start to look at some of the detail. Let's get this little stem in. I'm going to use my purpley grey colour to do that. And I'm just going to do it lightly. Just going to mark that in. We need to finish there, start up here. And it's got a slight bend in it. So I want to keep it a little bit bent. Something like that. Now, it's going to be pretty hard to get our fingers into that section. So I'm just going to go over it again. It needs to be slightly thicker. And as you may know, it's difficult to get really sharp lines with pastels, especially on this paper. So I've done it in the purpley kind of colour. It's got some different tones of brown. So if you pick up your brown that you picked out before that we haven't used yet, really, and I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of that on there. So again, using the edge of your pastel so that you're getting a hard line. We just want to create a little bit of difference in the tones or the colours there so that it doesn't look like just a line drawn on. And my red. Pop a bit of red in there as well. So have a look at the picture and see what colours you can see. Also noticing where the light's coming from. It doesn't look like it's catching the light so much, but you could put a bit of light on there if you wanted to. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. So that's probably about as thick as I want to get that. Again, as I said, you can't get your fingers into it, so you might have to just leave it as it is, or if you've got a blender, just kind of run it down there, just to push the pastel into the paper really, and try to sharpen up those edges a little bit. It's picking up some of the dark underneath, which actually I don't mind that, looks all right. So I'll leave it. Sometimes you have happy accidents like that. This blender's got a really pointy bit on it, so it's putting sort of these little funny little lines through there, but I don't mind how that looks. Try not to fiddle too much. The more you fiddle, the fatter it'll get. So I'm going to stop doing that right now. Tip off my dust again. So tempting to blow it. Try not to. So that might have to do for the stem, unless you have a pencil. So it's this is a brownie colour. And you can literally come in like this and just tidy up your edges. So pastel pencils are very useful for things like this when you've got lines or, you know, small areas that you need to get into, and you can tidy them up with your pencils. So it's a good option. And if you can't afford a whole set, then just buy yourself, I always say, go to get a white one, a black one, and maybe like a mid grey or a pinky kind of colour. I'm just going to see what happens if I pop a bit of white on there to lighten that up a tad. That's kind of cute. So don't be afraid to experiment. So I just put a bit of white charcoal pencil on there because I thought, well, the light's coming from down here, bottom left. So if it's coming from that way, casting a shadow that way, maybe it's hitting the tip of this little stem just there. It might not be, it doesn't look like it is in the picture, but you can, as I said before, you can exaggerate a little bit and just add a bit of light. If white's too white, then maybe find a yellow pencil, or let me see if I can whiten it down a little bit with this creamy colour. This is my light cream. So you can always try it with a bit of pastel. There, I like that. It kind of enhances the shadow too. So if I didn't like it and I wanted to undo it, you could literally just go over that again with your dark colour that you used before and get rid of it. So don't be afraid to try stuff with pastels. I think that's what one of the great things about it is. You can actually see what something might look like. And if you don't like it, you can get rid of it. So you can brush it off. I've got a little brush somewhere. Where did it go? A little stipple brush. Oh, here it is. Got my box of tricks here that go everywhere with me. So this little brush is really good for getting pastel dust off. I won't do it now because then it'll hold us up. But if I wanted to, and not so good for small areas like that, but if I wanted to, I could literally brush all this off and start with fresh paper. Reasonably fresh. It will stain, of course, but you can get all that extra pigment off there so you can fill it up again. So a little brush like this is really handy. Obviously, it's full of dust because I use it a lot to take things out. So, yeah, it's doable. So don't be afraid to try stuff. As I said, that's why I love them, because if you muck it up, you can fix it pretty easily. All right, I'm just going to come back in. I just keep looking at this picture and seeing more colours. So I'm going to bang a bit more orange in here. And now we can start to stop blending quite so much and just let the pastel sit on the paper. And that's when it starts to get this beautiful, I don't know, glaze or look, when you rely on the texture of the paper to show the pastel in its best form. So that's the beauty of it. You can just sort of softly wipe it over like that and just let it sit and sing on the paper and not push it in. So, and that's how I work. I usually work, you know, laying it all down nice and full. And then as you work up and get into the detail, then you can start to softly just smush it over there and get some beautiful effects. Let's grab our creamy colour. So this is not white. remember we had an apricot and a cream. Actually, I might go with apricot, which one's darker. That one's darker. So see where the light sections are? Just put a bit of that light apricot-y colour or cream, whatever you've got. You might not have both. So if you've only got one of those, just pop it where you can see a bit of the shine. So there's a shine on this part of the leaf here. I have to try and use my right hand to get it to the end. Sometimes you can't see over your other hand, so you've got to switch around. There's a little bit of a shine just through there. It's quite lovely. There's a little bit up here in this section. I can see quite a lot on this one here. Again, lovely. So see how we're sort of starting now to think about the light. We're starting to work out where the light's hitting. And we've still got our lighter colours that we can use for the really light bits. So this is why I like to save my light for last, because you can kind of work up then. You go from dark to light. And it allows us then to keep the white or the cream or whatever your light colour is, or your pale yellow, which was lovely, to put your highlights on. But we're starting to sort of get a little bit of light happening now. Just softly through there. So what I'm lying it flat and just using the edges of it to get those beautiful soft marks. If you use the tip of it, you're going to get a hard line. Okay, so we don't want to use the tip at this point because we just want beautiful soft marks like that. And remember, we can always come back and add more. So don't stress if you haven't got it all down yet. I'm just going to very gently push that around, hardly touching it, but I just want it to melt into the pastels that are already there. And again, it'll go a little bit muddy and it'll lose its vibrancy, but that's okay. Don't worry, we can put more on. Just starting to get a little bit of light in there. You do have to be careful with lights. If you use something that's got a lot of white in it like this, it can get milky quite quickly. If you don't want the milky look, then you want to find lights that don't have as much white in them. Or light yellows, like something like that is a beautiful, it's just a little bit warmer than white. See how that glows on top of that? So that's going to be a really lovely one to use for our lightest areas. All right, now we need to look at the veins. Have we got enough pastel on the paper? Is there enough there that we can start now building the veins in and not worrying too much about getting more colour down? If you feel like you want to add more colour or change something, then now's the time to do that. So I'm just going to throw a bit more green in here because I really love this green. And down that way. And then through there. A little bit through there. Yum, yum. My little granddaughter says, yum, yum. Aren't they beautiful? She's talking so much. She's only 14 months old and she can say yum, yum. And water is gluck, 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 gluck. She said apple the other day, which was super cute. Okay, so that's lovely, isn't it? So I'm just going to zhoosh that around a little bit. This is where we don't blend too much. We just want to softly, softly push, pushing, pushing. When we put the veins in, we'll probably have to touch some of this up, but that's okay. It's what we do. Yeah, nice. That's good. Okay. So veins, veins, veins. Let's study these veins. So what they are, they're actually, In the black and white version, which we did earlier in the charcoal, you can see there's a light and a dark side of each vein, and that's where the light's catching it. So they're risen up, aren't they? They're kind of bumpy on the leaf. So I'm going to mark them in first with charcoal. I like using charcoal for this kind of thing because it's soft. It works really nicely with pastel, but it's not too hard or dark. So let's draw this vein in here with a bit of charcoal. And then we've got another one that goes down to the middle leaf through there. And they've got another one that comes through here. So that's our 3 veins basically. Now each vein has little veins coming off it. So let's draw some of those in again with the charcoal. So just marking them in basically. Charcoal's really good for marking things in that, you know, that you're going to go over, but it's just a good way to kind of find your way back again. So if you lose your lines like we were talking about before, you can use charcoal and it'll be covered really easily. So we've got little veins off the veins off the veins. So just do some of those little squiggly lines in there. Some of these will leave, others will go over with pastel. But as I said earlier, it's a little bit harder to get the lines with pastel because sometimes it's so chunky. Okay, so we've got those little veins there. They're more obvious on one side than the other, aren't they? So we can just sort of suggest them lightly through there. Just lovely, soft, really nice. And then we can come down and then follow on this nice big one that comes up through here. And it's got some veins that run off to the side. Now, when we put pastel on here, we'll probably lose some of these veins or marks. But again, we're kind of rehearsing them and we're getting to know where they live. So then we can pop them back in after. I really want to focus on some of the ones that poke up the most. And that doesn't mean you've got to do the detail on all of them if you don't want to. You can kind of just let them do a couple and then let the others sit there. Because when we see something, we see detail in one thing, we kind of automatically interpret it with our eyes anyway. So often you don't need to put all that energy and detail into every part. So just marking these in. This will sort of become the shadow side of the veins as well. So think about that as you go. Okay. So we've got most of that drawn in now. So what we want to do is mark in. Let's mark in the lights. So I'm going to use my cream. Again, I'm saving my very light yellow or my white for last. I'm just going to use my cream and mark in some of these light areas. Again, I'm just not lying it flat on its side, but I'm using the side of it so I'm not getting a hard line. So pastels is all about figuring out how to hold them, which part to use, pressure, all those things. See, there's light through here and it's kind of in between these little veins. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the shapes of the light areas on that leaf. I was going to say it's maybe look at the black and white version, but it's not as wide as bright there. But just lightening up some of those spots and then you can dab with your finger. So don't push it around, just dab it softly with your finger and that'll just push it in without blending it too much into the other colours that are underneath it. So run around here with your creamy colour and just softly, softly mark in where you see the lightest areas. These are the shiny parts that might be catching the light, the sun. And I can see it on the edge. Some of the edges have a really quite light, bright section. where they might kind of fold up a little bit and catch the light. Especially around the tip of the stem here on the right side. You can see there's a fair bit of light there. And on the edges of the leaf coming across here. And we've got quite a lot of light bouncing through here in this right-hand section. And it's definitely quite strong on the vein. So what I've done there is I've drawn a line. See how I've drawn that white line just lightly in here? And because I had the charcoal line down first, it looks nearly like it's got a little dip or a fold there. So put a bit more charcoal in. That creates that beautiful shadow that I was talking about earlier with the other first drawing that we did. And it's not too dark though. So that's why the charcoal is lovely, because it's actually not too strong. And then if I just dab that, so softly, softly dabbing, not blending, just dabbing, see how that looks like it's got that beautiful texture. So it's dipping down into the vein and then out again on the other side. That's what we're trying to make happen. Okay. So we'll probably use charcoal a bit to do that, unless you've got a pencil or something else that you want to use, a pastel pencil in those browny grey colours, or a dark purple would be beautiful for the shadow. So I'm just running around with my cream and I'm putting little bits of light here and there, noticing where it runs next to those veins. So just putting it down through there. And then hopefully if I put my charcoal line through there, it might give it that feeling of being risen up, bumpy. Yeah. Down this vein here, so like we did with the eraser before with the charcoal, we're using pastel instead of the eraser. So I can see there's light all the way down this little vein here, and it gets interrupted as each other vein intersects on it. So you can see that bit of light running through there. And I'm going to bring that all the way down to the tip of the vein here. And then we've got more light over on this side where the leaf edge kind of folds up a little bit and catches the light. So really noticing where is it light and just rubbing it on softly, softly. No hard lines. Keep it quite soft if you can. There we go, beautiful. So that's not quite there yet, that section. We've got more work to do in there, but I still want to just kind of play around a little bit with more light. Pop that down through here. And through there. It gets a bit tricky, but you've just got to go slowly and check the detail. That's the devil's in the detail, as they say. So we've got to get the light down and then put the lines in so we can create that lovely feeling of texture. So we'll just do this part first. So I'm just going to dab it with my finger. Dab, dab, lightly, lightly. Don't blend because you'll lose the brightness. It'll kind of mix in with all the other colours and lose its brightness. So I'm just going to dab, dab, dab like that. See, and it's already starting to look like it's got texture and bumps. So I'm going to see what happens if I use a pencil. It's probably going to be fine. I just don't want it to be too strong, too dark. I'm just pressing quite lightly. So if you do want to use a pencil, just go lightly, lightly. The thing with pastels is you start light and you can always go harder and darker. but it's more difficult to lift off, if you know what I mean. So yeah, start light and then just go darker if you feel you need to. It's like treading carefully, really. The pencil's working okay, I think. I need to sort of blur that off a little bit on the edges there. So like, again, with the pad of your finger, you could just pull it across like that to soften the edge a little bit. And I might come back in with a bit more light afterwards. So we're going to work on this section first so that we work out the process, basically, because everything has a process. It's about, well, what do we do first? And then what do we do second? And how do we make that, you know, do what we need it to do? So let's work in this part of the leaf first. Once you've got your system sorted out, then you can kind of move around the leaf and do all the other parts. But you've got to get your system done first, because then get that clear in your mind. Okay, so that's starting to look all right. I'm going to use my, if you've got a white pencil, so again, we don't want it to be really, really white. And the other secret to, if you do have to get into your pastel and use a pencil and you've got to lean on it, grab yourself some glassine paper, which I do have somewhere. I'll just grab a bit. It's quite a big bit, but I buy these in sheets and you can just cut them down or keep them big. So what the glassine does is it stops your pastel from smudging. So if I want to get into over here, you can put the glassine down. You can clip it on or pin it to the board, and I can just work in here with my pencil. Okay, and I can really focus on getting all the little details in with a pencil and leaning on there. This is when you're holding your pencil like you normally would, because we're working on all those fine little details. And the glassine paper keeps my hand clean and the painting from smudging. So see if you can get yourself a piece if you don't have some already. I use glassine a lot, especially when I'm getting into my blossoms and doing little bits like this. It's just a wonderful way of avoiding smudging your artwork. And you can move it around and it'll be fine. So definitely worth having some. It's also great for storing your pastels if you want to store them, you know, stack them or something like that. If you have glassine in between each painting, then that will stop them smudging. And when you want to reuse it, you can see on here there's a bit of pastel on there. You just, it's probably on the other side, but you can just wipe it clean and reuse it. So it lasts forever. It's great stuff. Just so looking for all my little highlights, this is where you want to come in with your detail. If you don't have a pencil, then grab your pastel. I'm going to use this pale yellow actually because it's a little bit warmer than white. You can always put it over white too, just to warm it up. See how that's nice, isn't it? Looks like sunshine to me. So this light yellow is a beautiful option for the lights. So we're just working our way around this really slowly. I'm going to highlight my lights a little bit more. I want those veins to poke out like that. And I can soften them off a little bit with my fingers when I've finished doing this bit. I really like this bright light. It will bring it to life. So get your base down first, get all your base colours in first, and then work on the detail. That's the process. And also working out, you know, what you like and what works best for how you want this to look. So we've got a fair bit of light here. Really study the picture. Look at where all the light is. I did put white down there, but I'm going to throw yellow over the top because I think the yellow is nicer. That's personal choice. If you prefer white, then that's great. Go for it. You might not have a yellow that works. So see how that's now starting to lift off the page just about and jump out at you, because we've got our beautiful dark shadow in there. And now we're working on all these beautiful lights and darks and textures. Okay. So I've got a bit of a mess going on in there. So I'm going to come back with my green. So don't be afraid of putting colour back in that you might have used earlier. You can do that too. Pastels are so forgiving. They really are. They're a lovely medium and they're really forgiving and nice to work with. So try things. Don't be afraid. I'm just going to draw this line on a little bit stronger. Down through there. You can see in the picture that there's quite a light, bright, sort of shiny side on this vein. So I'm just enhancing that a little bit more with my white charcoal pencil. Getting some of this beautiful golden light back in now with my pale yellow. Gorgeous. So that vein just pops now. I do need to add another one about here, I think. Again, I'm using the charcoal just to get that. It's just soft. It's lovely. It's not too dark and not too heavy. And just give me enough of a tone or colour to create a nice shadow without being too dark. Because you don't want shadow as dark as the shadow under the leaf. That'd be too heavy, I think. But that's quite lovely. So that's the process for the rest of the leaf now. Now we've kind of figured out what we need to do, what colours we need and how it all works. But that really does bring it to life, I think. And just dab that softly. So if you find some of it's too much, you can just dab it in. If you need to add more, you can add more. Kind of fun, isn't it? Creating this. Okay, so I'm just going to softly pull that away a little bit in there. Gently, gently around all the veins. Good. Okay, tipping off dust. Now we do have a hole here, remember? There's a little hole. I'm just going to use my darkest shadow colour to pop a little hole there. Tip off the dust. Slightly bigger than I meant to make it, but never mind. And then we can go, it's got like a funny little white or light coloured crusty thing around the edge of it. Not too concerned about that. I'm just going to leave it like that because that looks all right. And then over here, oh, we need to make it the same colour as the paper, don't we? The little hole in the shadow here. It's not quite the same colour, but I might add a bit of my grey colour over the top to mute that down a tad. And that can be my little hole. It might look weird. If it looks too weird, I'll just get rid of it. Again, easy to get rid of stuff. I quite like that actually. But I feel like the hole needs to be in that direction. Tipping off. There we go. That'll do. Just a bit of light around it. So it looks like it's got this edge that's poking up, catching the light. There we go. How cool is that? I like that. And we've got a big brown blob on this vein here. So you don't have to put it in if you don't want to. I might just put a brown spot there. And then we can do some more spots here and there. Another one just there. So it looks a bit more real then, doesn't it? Cool. So pretty much got to do the same process, working our way around the picture. So I'm going to come back over this with my charcoal and just darken that off a little bit more, because then I can come back with light and work on that. And you can see it's kind of dark either side of this big vein. And then there's a lighter part down the center of it. That's going to be fun to get into. Let's try. So sometimes you can get a nice edge on your sticks. And depending on the shape of the stick. So this one is a little rectangular one. It's a Blue Earth, which is a beautiful brand of pastel. They're very soft and they come in little rectangles like that. And you get these nice sharp edges on them. So sometimes we can use the sharp edge. I don't know if it's going to be light enough, but I could just put the sharp edge down. No, it's not light enough, I don't think. Maybe, let's see, dust. We can work with that. Or we can find another color. Let's try this creamy color. See if I can get this fine enough. This is the tricky bit, is getting a fine line. That'll be a good start, I reckon. It's darker up towards the stem and then it gets a little bit lighter as it comes down. So that's a nice fine-ish line. It's not easy, but you can still make it work. Put some of this creamy color down here on the tip, because this one's got quite a lot of lovely light just here. While I've got it in my hand, I tend to do that. I'll think, oh, where else can I put this while it's here? Bit of this creamy color over there. If it's too dull or quiet, you can always add more yellow. Some up in there too, while I've got it in my hand. Lovely light. That's where we started, wasn't it, over there? Beautiful. Okay, and oh, there's some nice light just in here too. Right on that edge there. That's nice. This is my cream, so it's not white. I probably won't use too much white, I don't think. So light down through there. Again, that's telling me that this bit's catching the light, so it's tilted up or tipping up a little bit to catch the sun. So all these things tell us, you know, how the thing's folding or the shape or direction. It's all about the light and the dark. Okay. Where else do we need to throw some of this? Maybe on the side of the vein here. Just softly, softly. So same process as before, just finding the light, dabbing it in gently, gently, so we can build up these veins and get them to really sing on the leaf. I missed this one before. Put him in there. A bit more charcoal just down through there. And it kind of goes down in there. And then I can pop a bit more light in there. So you've got to find the light that you like best and then just work with that. Okay, so this vein obviously looks a bit silly at the moment because I've got a light line down the middle of the dark lines, but I'm just going to dab it in softly. Okay, so it's all sort of dabbed. And then we can work a little bit more on the darker colours in the veins. So bringing this one out, see, I'm pressing a little bit harder, got my charcoal, pressing a tad harder there to get that to be a bit darker because it is darker on the picture. And then I'll come back over that in a minute with some light to bring it alive. Down through there. And then there's a bit more, there's a dark vein coming down there. So, and then I'm going to darken off the edge of the center vein again. Softly, softly. As it gets to the tip or the end, it gets finer and almost disappears as it wanders down into the light, down through there. Okay. And then on the other side, they're not quite as dark, are they? We've got a bit more kind of, or not more less light bouncing on that side. A lot of little cute veins running around through there. Do some loose little lines through there. Same on this side of this leaf. It's not catching much light. It doesn't have a lot of detail. It's just got cute little lines. Okay, so running down through there. We've got these other little lines that come down like that. And off to there. All sorts going on. Okay. So now we've got all our bits of shadow in. I'm just going to dab them in softly because I want them to sort of not be just a hard line. It's got to sort of be soft and gentle. Okay. And then dabbing in the center vein again to soften that off so it's not too hard. Cool. I'm going to pop a bit of a dark line on the other side again, just to not all the way down, just in a couple of areas through there. Groovy. Dabbing. Softly, softly. Dab, dab, dab. There we go. And see how that's now starting to look like it's got some shadow and things around it. So I'm going to come back now with this little cream. I actually might try the white. I know I said I wasn't going to use white, but if you go like this softly with the pencil and then dab it, it doesn't look white anymore. It just gets a bit lighter. So that's what I'm trying to do, because it's not a white vein. It's the same color as the leaf. But if I put a little bit of highlight on it and then mush it in with the leaf colors, it should just take on those colors without looking white. Then it's going to need more shadow again. I'll come back in with this brown, I think. See what brown does. So what I want to do is bring the shadow sort of across like this. I've got a little bit of brown. I'm putting the edge of it along the side of the vein there and just flicking it out to get a sort of a soft mark like that. Does that make sense? And then not a heavy line, nothing too strong, just a little soft mark that I can then pull from the vein out towards the leaf, like we did around the edges before with the pad of my finger. That's the plan. And hopefully that will start to create some more shadow. So softly, softly, don't press too hard because I haven't got much pigment there. It's just a little bit. But it should start to create that ridge, hopefully. Nearly there. I think we need a bit more light now. So I'm going to come back with my cream and look at the picture. I have to get the right angle. And again, not highlighting the whole thing, just a little bit of it where the light might be catching on the bumpy bits of that little vein as it comes down there. Still not right. Dabbing, 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 dabbing. Now we need a bit more dark. To and fro, isn't it? It's to and fro all the time. I'm going to try this pencil, see if I can get a bit more dark down through here. I feel like I need a bit more definition now. We've built the layers up to create a little bit of shadow. There we go. That's working nicely now. So just softly, softly coming down, little squiggly marks, not a hard line, soft line, because the shadow is a soft shadow. It's not a hard mark like the shadow under the leaf. It's more muted and soft. So just little squiggly lines. If you can't use a pencil, you might have to try this with a pastel. Just get the edge of it and zhoosh it in around like that. Keep on going. Down through there. So that's starting to look like it's got some texture on it now. And I can just touch it up on the other side a tad. Not everywhere, just a little bit here and there. I think that'll just about do it for that bit. Picking up my cream and just putting a bit more light down on these guys. Remember, the light's coming from the bottom left, so you've got to have your light on that side or coming from that direction. Otherwise, it won't make sense. Really important to get the light in the right spot. So just softly, softly. And I'm going to dab those in a bit because they're a tad strong. Okay. So that's starting to really come alive now. And then I'm going to move over onto this section here. So we'll do the same process over here. So just coming back from the stem, because where the veins meet the stem, it's a little darker there. So I'm just using this, what color is this? Like a grey pencil to get that to kind of all join up. And then this vein here is quite dark. And it comes over here like this. It's probably more brown than grey, but grey is what's in my hand. So that's what I'll use. Still seems to be working okay. So again, just marking in that beautiful veins. They're sort of more on the outside, top side than the underneath bit. And smudging all of this a little tad, a little bit. Just dabbing that in a bit more. So we can start to work on the shadows. Yeah, and then we can just suggest some very light little veins on the bottom side of that one. Sort of all come down through there. We touched on that before, so we're just all merging together nicely in there. Lost my red edge on there. Pop a bit of brown on there just for fun. See what happens. Don't be afraid to try things. Well, that's nice. Quite like that. It's a bit hard, but I'll soften it off. Lovely, lovely. Okay, dabbing, 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 softly, softly. There we go. There's also a little like a bite or something out of this bit here. There's a little brown edge there. Could be an insect bite. So that's nice. Okay, and then we can work over here again, just getting some of the highlights onto the veins. So they're more on the tip than anywhere with our light. And just a tad on the main vein. Again, It's on the underside of the main vein because the sun's coming from down here. So you just got to remember the direction the sun's coming in. I know this part doesn't really have much light on it, but I'm just going to slightly highlight it a tiny, teeny bit for fun. And same over that side. Highlight this edge here. Cool. Soften off that line a little bit. Come back in with charcoal. Charcoal is just nice and soft. Subtle little marks. Lovely. Okay. So that's just about done, I think. All we need to do really is pop in a few really light parts, light bits that will make it sing. And then we're just about finished. Right on time too. That was good. Okay. Just going to lighten up a few spots in here. I'm still using the cream. I haven't gone to white. I don't think I will. I find white's too sort of a bit, I don't know, milky, I guess, sometimes. Especially when you're working with beautiful warm colours like this. I'd rather use creams and yellows. They're just a bit nicer. Okay. So if I get my bright yellow, this is my light yellow, lovely lemony yellow. I'm just going to pop that on a few places where I want some warmth, just on the edges that might be catching the light more so. There's a spot down here that's got a lovely bit of light right on the corner. That's rather nice. And on the tip of this leaf here, so this leaf is sort of arching up a little bit. That's why we can see the shadow under there. And so if it's arching up, it's going to be catching the light around here, I reckon. Lovely. And then there's a bit more over here too. So on this edge, there's a little bit of light. So the light against the shadow underneath the leaf is what's going to make it really pop. Like just, jump off the page basically. And it's a wonderful thing when you can make something do that. Make a flat picture jump, I think anyway. I get a bit of a kick out of that. And I might just yellow up the tip of the stem too. It's a bit too white. That's better, isn't it? A bit warmer. Lovely. So you can continue on if you wish. I'm just going to red up some of these veins. There's a bit more red in there than grey. Again, warming them up. I think that looks not too shabby. The edges are still a bit dusty. If you wanted to and you had the pencils, you could grab yourself a, I'm just trying to find an orange or something. I haven't got one right next to me. I don't think. So, there's an orangey colour. You could just come around the edges with your pencils to get those sharp edges if you wanted to really make them nice and crisp. So it's good to have a few pencils if you can get some. They make good birthday presents. Should have had them for Mother's Day, shouldn't we? So something like that is nice because you don't get as much dust off the pencils and they can actually help to create really nice sharp lines. So it's a good option. I don't use pencils much, only when I really, really have to. But that looks quite nice. Tip off the dust again. There we go. So I'm going to call that pretty much done. And as I said earlier, if you want to take anything off the paper, so where all the dust has maybe fallen or dropped, you can dab it like that with your kneadable eraser, pick it up softly, softly, and then just keep kneading it to get a clean edge. Take off those dark bits there. It is possible, it's just very slow and laborious. Oops. And then you do that, dip it onto the picture and spread more pastel everywhere. It's a messy medium, but I love it. It's beautiful. There you go. And don't forget to sign it. Your name on like this. That's charcoal or pencil. And then we're done. Lovely, lovely. Now, if you need the video for this and you want to have another look at it or do it again another time, I'm happy to send that through to you because you've paid for the classes today and the course. And also, if you can't make it for a class, something happens and you can't get to it, happy to send the videos on so you can do it in your own time. So thank you for joining me. I'm just going to flick back to all the people. There we are. How did everyone go?
Not too bad. Jeannie,
Yes.
I've got a wedding on the 3rd of June. So I think the 1st of June, that class, I'll ask you for the video so I can do that later.
No problem. Easy peasy.
Thanks.
Easy peasy. So what's the verdict? Did everyone have fun?
Yeah.
Got more to do.
Was good. I liked it.
It was
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll get the video of you if I can, because I'd really love to do it again.
Sure.
Oh, I will too, please, Jeannie.
I'll send it to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would be great. Yeah.
No
I'll
problem.
call this one my practice one. The next one will be awesome.
We send you a photo?
Pardon?
We send you a photo now?
Yes, please. Yes.
No,
Yeah,
I
when you
meant
take
that blob of bug, because it sort of looked like a bug to me.
It is a bug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bug.
oh, it does look like a bug, doesn't it?
Yeah, when you bring it up close.
It is a bug.
Is it really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
got little legs.
Ah, wow. There you go.
Yeah.
Isn't that cute? Who knew? Who knew? No, I just thought it was a brown blob, but sure, put a bug in. That's cute.
Okay.
Yeah, lovely ladies. I'll send the video through for sure.
All right. Thank you.
And for the sake of this video that I'm making now, I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Okay.